Foundation for Defense of Democracy's David Daoud and retired Marine intelligence officer and national security analyst Hal Kempfer are both here. It's good to see you both. Thanks for joining us. First, let's start with some of these live images we're seeing here. And I don't know if we caught any live, but what I'm about to do is I'm going to rewind. And you know what? We're seeing them live right now. Yep. We're seeing something being shot into the sky. And David, give us a little bit of context, because I know you've been hearing about what we've been seeing in the Middle East. What are we seeing, David?
Thank you for having me on. So I can't exactly see what you have on your screen from where I'm sitting, but presumably from what I'm seeing reports coming in on my phone, rockets are continuing to be, fire is still continuing to be exchanged between the Lebanese side and the Israeli side of the border. It's not uncommon when you have a ceasefire go into effect that you'll have this kind of overflow, if you will, of continued tit for tat for some time until matters start to settle down.
So, Hal, from what you can tell, what might we be looking at exactly on the screen here?
Well, what I'm seeing there is when you see the automatic fire going up with those arcs, that's usually something like what we call CRAMs. It's fairly well, it's not large bore, but it's about 30 or 25 millimeter automatic high. It's a high cyclic rate of fire automatic weapon that's used for basically taking out drones or close in missiles. There it is. See it right there?
Yep.
There might be a missile that's in close. My guess is, looking at that, they're probably aiming at drones. And from what I've seen of this and some missile fire, it's pretty clear that Hezbollah is running right up to that 4 a.m. deadline, if you will. And they may be doing some sort of, I'm not seeing the missile arcs that I would expect to see. And plus, that's close-in fire support. So what you're looking at are close-in fires. So what you're looking at is something that's fairly close in. Obviously, it doesn't look like there's a missile coming in. So I would imagine that Hezbollah is firing a lot of drones at Haifa. Of course, Haifa being that northern port city, that's a very logical target that they would go after. But this does say something going into this ceasefire that obviously Hezbollah is going to try and do as much mayhem as they can, going right up to that 4 a.m. deadline.
And just for context, if anybody's watching this on YouTube later on, this is taking place at roughly 10:15 Eastern time that we're seeing these images come through here. So again, a live look at Haifa. David, let's get into the news of the day here. The back and forth between Hezbollah and the IDF has been going on since October 2023. David, why is this deal happening right now? What do you deem the primary factor in getting the two sides to calm down?
Well, the United States has been pressing for calming of the northern front since the outset. Hezbollah has wanted this. I think from Prime Minister Netanyahu's perspective, he laid out several reasons for accepting the ceasefire deal. If we take them at face value, it's that the IDF needs time to rest and rearm. He wants to reorient the IDF towards confronting Iran, which he says is Israel's primary threat, and he wants to decouple Lebanon from Gaza and continue the fight against Hamas. Now, whether that happens or whether the Israelis are allowed to do that is a separate issue. We've already heard reports that Brett McGurk is supposed to be sent to Saudi Arabia to broker a ceasefire deal when it comes to Gaza. An Egyptian delegation was reportedly supposed to arrive in Israel to discuss hostage negotiations. We saw President Macron of France also talk about ending the conflict in Gaza. So again, we can take Prime Minister Netanyahu's statements at face value. There may be something behind the scenes that may have happened, perhaps pressure from the outgoing administration telling the Israelis that, look, you need to stop this now, or maybe there will be a cessation of arms shipments, or perhaps some kind of measures at the United Nations, the UN Security Council, similar to how the outgoing Obama administration failed to veto a UN Security Council resolution on Israeli settlements in the West Bank when they were going out in 2016.
So, Hal, this is something that you were talking to me about offline we found interesting. This news today of a ceasefire, it separates Iran's biggest proxy, Hezbollah, from the rest of the axis. There's been no ceasefire with Hamas, the Houthis, etc. What does this mean?
Well, this is a big split in the axis of resistance, if you will. This is a milestone moment that you're really seeing with Iran's whole plan that they've had for years. Hezbollah is their first and their biggest proxy in the region. They have a global terrorist network. We've gone toe to toe with Hezbollah many times. They've been responsible for things going back, for example, the '83 bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut. So to have them split and set up a separate ceasefire says a lot about what Israel has really accomplished here. Israel has literally split Hezbollah off from Hamas and kind of split Hezbollah off from the rest of the axis, if you will, to include the primary sponsor, Iran, in that they're cutting their own deal, if you will, with Israel, completely separate from them. And one of the big things that really I see on this is that they have been so debilitated. You go back to the pager, the pager explosions or the pager bombings, the walkie-talkie bombings. The numerous or innumerable, I should say, Hezbollah leadership targets have been taken out through a variety of things, mostly airstrikes, and then you take out all the you add in all the different missile cache sites, all the different things that have been uncovered, that have been destroyed, and Hezbollah is back on its heels right now. And the thing is, Israel didn't really have to destroy Hezbollah. Israel just simply had to change the math in Lebanon that the disproportionate, if you will, preponderance of military power shifted to the Lebanese army and the Lebanese armed forces versus Hezbollah. And I think that's part of the calculus that we're seeing here, that the Lebanese armed forces are in a better position relative to Hezbollah. Although I would be the first to say I think the Lebanese armed forces need a lot of help, and there's a big mission in front of them, so they're going to need a lot of support and aid from the other countries.
David, what do we need to know about the specifics of this plan? It was brokered by the U.S. and France. Is it intended to be permanent?
Yes, there was some talk before that this would be a 60-day ceasefire. It doesn't seem to be from the terms of the ceasefire. It appears that the 60-day marker will be one that will require the Israelis, that'll be the timeline for the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon, in tandem with Hezbollah's withdrawal north of what seems to be the Litani River and the LAF's deployment to South Lebanon. Now, moving forward, there's a separate letter of assurance that was brokered between the United States and Israel. Again, I would not necessarily hang my hat on that. Future administrations can choose to disregard letters of assurance, but that talks about Israel's right to respond in a two-tiered manner to threats emanating from South Lebanon. So imminent threats emanating from South Lebanon, for example, someone is about to fire a rocket, plant an explosive on the fence, something of that nature. Israel has the right to respond in accordance with international law, as the letter of assurance states. More distant threats or less immediate threats, for example, Hezbollah reestablishing its weapons production capability or smuggling weapons elsewhere in Lebanon. Israel will not have an automatic ability to respond. They will have to turn to the United States first as part of this oversight committee that will include, it seems, the United Kingdom and France. And that oversight committee will ask the Lebanese armed forces to first deal with the problem. And here I have to express my skepticism, because the issue with the Lebanese armed forces isn't just a matter of a lack of capability, it's a matter of a lack of will when it comes to dealing with Hezbollah. Regardless, the deal states that if the Lebanese armed forces is not able to resolve this problem to proper satisfaction, only then will the Israelis perhaps be able to act militarily. But again, there's a lot of gaps between identifying the problem, identifying the violation of the ceasefire agreement, and the Israelis being able to act militarily. So this is intended it would seem to be a permanent ceasefire with some concessions to Israeli freedom of action.
So, David, I know you can't see the visuals on screen, but we are still seeing blasts in real time. We're still seeing blasts shooting up into the sky. It's 5:25 Israel time in the morning right now, 10:25 Eastern time. When should this stop? What is your understanding of the situation? When is how far away are we from the moment of ceasefire?
Again, like as I stated earlier, I think these things tend to peter out, not immediately, but over, perhaps a few hours, maybe a day. We'll see how these things progress. Again, I don't necessarily see Hezbollah wanting to immediately cease fire. There's going to be a kind of a clamor right now between both sides to claim victory, and Hezbollah's projection of victory, or its portrayal of victory, is its ability to demonstrate that it has survived this unprecedented Israeli onslaught on the organization, that it was able to, up until the last moment, continue to confront Israel and strike at Israel. I don't necessarily see a change in Hezbollah's ideology or outlook. I think they're waiting for this thing to go into effect. They want the respite. They probably realize that this ceasefire is going to restore matters to a large degree to the status quo ante within Lebanon, where the Lebanese will not act against Hezbollah. The failure of 1701, Resolution 1701, was really Lebanon's failure, because they had the primary duty under international law that was emphasized by Resolution of 1701 to control their territory, to control their borders, to ensure that non-state groups cannot act and use their territory to attack other countries, including Israel, irrespective of whether Lebanon chooses to recognize Israel or not. Lebanon failed. Nothing in the constellation of forces in Lebanon has necessarily changed to provide optimism moving forward with this deal. The one thing that could guarantee that is the threat of continued Israeli military action. And as I noted earlier, this ceasefire deal curtails that severely. And despite what Prime Minister Netanyahu came out and said earlier, U.S. officials came out afterwards and said, no, Israel doesn't have complete freedom of action moving forward, even according to the letter of assurance, and not in the deal itself.
Well, Hal, Israel's military has killed nearly all of Hezbollah's top leaders, but Hezbollah had continued to fire missiles into Israel. How far away was Israel from completely eliminating that threat till now?
Well, to eliminate Hezbollah completely is akin to trying to eliminate Hamas completely in Gaza. And we've seen how that's gone. I mean, they have been fighting, and militarily, in terms of organized military units, Hamas was destroyed some time ago, but there's still insurgent elements. Well, that's the same problem. They can go in, but to go into Lebanon, there's a couple of things. Number one, it is much more difficult terrain. I'm not going to take away from the urban terrain challenges that Israel's been dealing with in the Gaza Strip, because that urban terrain above surface, below surface, particularly below surface, has been extremely challenging. However, if you look at Lebanon, southern Lebanon in particular, you've got undulating terrain. You've got some very difficult areas that for mechanized movement are very canalized, if you will, or some might say channelized, but I use the term canalized in that it's like a small canal in terms of how you move those things through. So it's very challenging. It's more difficult to use fire support in some ways that they want to use. So to go in there and actually root out Hezbollah from Lebanon, to root it out from the Shiite population, would be a massive operation. I think actually that would probably be beyond the scope of what the IDF could really accomplish in total. So to eliminate the threat completely might not be possible. Now, to debilitate them to the point and put them to a position where they don't pose an active threat to Israel, that's where we're kind of circling around, and is to get them to a point where they say, look, continuing this fight achieves nothing for Hezbollah. There's no strategic goals that will be accomplished by doing this. And that's where I'm not saying they're there, but they're certainly a lot closer to there than they were a couple of months ago. And that's been this ongoing series of strikes. And one of the things that we don't know, that you can kind of infer, those huge hits in southern Beirut, in downtown Beirut today, those are going against what are called high payoff targets. These are targets deeply embedded. The reason that they might be in downtown Beirut or certainly southern Beirut is because that being in that urban area really deters Israel from doing something militarily. Well, that deterrence is gone. And so they're hitting some targets. So I think we're going to find out probably over the next 60 days just how effective Israel's strike missions have been throughout that area, and also find out more about how well they've cleared out Hezbollah between the border and the Litani River.
Before we go here, David, I got to ask you, what's been going on in Gaza as all of this has been happening? What does a little more calm up north mean for the fighting in the enclave?
Well, in theory, Israeli military operations are continuing in Gaza. In theory, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, this will allow Israel to pivot more of its resources to continuing the fight in Gaza and finishing off the remnants of Hamas, perhaps securing the enclave and no longer having to deal with a multi-front threat against perhaps the most powerful actor on Israel's border, namely Hezbollah. So in theory, this should be facilitating Israel's continued operations in Gaza. Now, this may run up against pressure from either the Biden administration or the international community to halt operations in Gaza, if not in tandem with this ceasefire in Lebanon, but perhaps shortly thereafter. Now, we shouldn't be unduly optimistic here that a ceasefire may go into effect in Gaza. If we recall, in July, August, we were told we were on the cusp of a ceasefire, and that didn't materialize. I think the Israelis are going to try to press, perhaps, to continue operations in Gaza, at least come out of this with some kind of victory, given where in the north, polls of the Israeli public have shown that a majority do not view that Israel was victorious over Hezbollah. So there's still an image of victory that's necessary for Prime Minister Netanyahu as he contemplates his legacy, as he contemplates his political future, and he may try to pursue that in Gaza now that he has a quieter front, potentially a quieter front on the north.
All right. David, Hal, we'll leave it there for now. Good to see you both. Thanks.